thank you so much for joining us.
Good morning to you, Wilfred, but it wasn't a very easy morning for Israelis that spent the evening and the night in a shelter. Millions of Israelis were under attack coming from Iran last evening.
I know, and I guess that is where I wanted to start, to ask you whether Israelis are currently living in fear today.
I think, first of all, this is the Jewish New Year, as you probably know, a moment that we want to start a new year and wish each other a sweet new year. And this year was one of the hardest, most challenging years in Israel's history. And Israelis are very resilient. So I was speaking to my family, so all my brothers and my parents spend the night in different shelters around the country. And they're very strong because they know we're doing the right thing. We are bringing security back to our borders. Israel lost security at the 7th of October with the brutal Hamas attack. And for almost a year, 60,000 people were being evacuated from their homes in the northern border. And now it's time for us to make sure that all Israelis live in peace and to make sure Iran's proxies will be eliminated and that Iran will pay really severe price for what it did in the last, not just in the last 24 hours, but also throughout the years it's been making sure its proxies will build a fire ring around Israel of terrorism.
What are the current state of your supplies when it comes to the Iron Dome and the particular missiles you need to maintain the Iron Dome? Is Israel confident it could continue to repel similar repeated attacks for days, for weeks, for months to come if it needed to?
Well, obviously, Israel has a very, very efficient defense systems, but this is not the goal. No country can tolerate 180 missiles coming and hurting civilians. This is what the Iranian regime was doing yesterday. It was targeting civilians, innocent people in their homes, once they were preparing to their holiday, to their new year. And I think no country can tolerate that. Britain wouldn't have tolerated 1 day of missile attack on London. And we need to make sure that the Iranians won't have motivation to fire on Israel because they will understand the price will be too big for them. They know that their proxies being eliminated one by one. We saw the elimination of the leader of Hamas, Hassan Nasrallah, al-Qaeda terrorist, blood on his hands, in charge of so many terror attacks on Jews, on Israelis, on Americans around the world. So now Israel is saying very clearly, whoever is attacking Israel will pay the price, and we will make sure our people will be safe.
I mean, those words, Prime Minister Netanyahu said almost exactly those words last night. He said, whoever attacks us, we will attack them. Specifically, what do you think he meant by that?
Well, I think it's very clear that Israel will make sure that Iran will pay a price by taking a military action against Iran. I'm not getting into the tactics of that. This is for the government, for the cabinet, and for our army to decide, and they have different plans, because Iran is been fueling all the problems in the Middle East for years. Just like you heard Prime Minister Keir Starmer says Iran is in charge on all the problems of the Middle East and even a threat to the UK. Your MI5 was saying that Iran is one of the biggest threats that there is on a UK soil by trying to hurt British citizens in your country. So this is a threat to Ukraine, this is a threat to Israel. The Iranians been supplying all those UAVs that hurted Ukraine on their soil. So it's clear that this is a global threat. This is not just a threat to Israel.
Mm-hmm. I guess the question is, what are the sorts of responses that are being considered? Clearly, as it relates to Gaza and now Lebanon, you decided to go as far as sending in ground troops. Is that on the cards with Iran?
Again, you're asking me a tactic question. I think the most important thing is to understand what the government, the Israeli government, is trying to achieve. We're trying to restore peace and quiet to our people. The last year, Israelis lived under non-stop our cities being bombarded by non-stop fire rockets from Hezbollah in the north. And obviously, if we wouldn't have made the military operation in Gaza, we would have been in a place that 7th of October could have been repeated, this barbaric terror attack on our people. Hezbollah had the same plan, to invade the northern border, to occupy the Galilee, which is part of Israel's northern communities, and to make sure that the plan that Hamas was barbarically executing would have been the case to the people in the north. People could have been killed and raped they were going through those horrific atrocities from the hands of Hamas terrorists. Today, we also demand from the international community to draw a very clear red line and to say Iran will pay the price also on the economic level. We want all our allies around the world to impose sanctions on Iran, to make sure that Iran will pay also economic price for its aggression. And we would like to see the IRGC, the Revolutionary Guard, will be proscribed as a terror organization, because this is what they do. They spread terror all around the world.
It's interesting you bring up that point, because while I understand you don't want to talk about tactics, I guess end goals are a relevant talking point. You mentioned killing of Hassan Nasrallah. Of course, both Hezbollah and Hamas are proscribed in this country, but they are terrorist organizations. Iran is a state. So is your aim to eradicate its leaders? And again, you don't have to get into tactics, but I think the end goals are relevant.
I think, again, Hezbollah is a good model for that. So Hezbollah was a political power as part of the Lebanon government, and still European countries, the Americans and the UK, they proscribed Hezbollah because they understood that even though claiming being part of a political system, they are pure terror organization. And Iran, it's a proxy. Iran was sending Hezbollah as its proxy, and obviously Iran is much dangerous force than its own proxies, because it's the one that is making this architecture, this regional architecture of failed countries that in the void they bring more terror, including the Houthis in Yemen. So we need to make sure that the Iranian regime will be deterred. And it cannot be deterred by words. It cannot be deterred just by condemning their actions. They need to be deterred by sanctions, and they need to be deterred by a military action. And Israel will respond to this aggression.